Hello there everybody, Tamebugster here, and today, well, I'm stepping outside of my usual comfort zone of making crappy YouTube playthroughs and music, and will instead be talking about my new favorite game, Indigo Park, and more importantly, some interesting theories that I have come up with regarding everyone's new favorite AI assistant, Rambley the Raccoon. Let's hop into it. Before we delve into the theory, I would first like to cover a summary of the game so far. So if you haven't already guessed, there are spoilers ahead, and here is your warning now. I'll give you a few more seconds. Are we good? Alright. So we start the game with our player character, Mr. Muscles himself, Ed, entering Indigo Park. Based on the game's intro, he might be an urban explorer who had decided to come back to this location for nostalgia's sake. As soon as Ed enters the park, you encounter Rambley the Raccoon, an AI digital park assistant made to make your trip to Indigo Park as swell as possible. Rambley reveals that the last person to enter the park had done so 2,920 days, 4 hours, 23 minutes, and 38 seconds ago, which is approximately 8 years. You quickly make your way through the park, solve a quick puzzle to open the gate, and are granted a critter cuff, which is similar to a fast pass band at Disney World. After this, you finally get to enter the park, only for the way to be caved in.
Looks like the park is going through some renovations.
Rambley directs you to his attraction, Rambley's Railroad, where you meet all of the characters and yada yada. There's a lot that's really not too important there that you won't miss, but I'm sure it'll be more important later on. After leaving the train ride, you have access to the main hub. Enter Lloyd's Theater, get attacked by Lloyd, move to Jetstream Junction, attempt to ride Rooftop Racers, which had been destroyed before you get there, and lastly enter Molly's Landing Pad. This playhouse area is home to the antagonist of this first chapter, Molly Macaw, who, upon reaching the end of the playhouse area, will begin to chase you until you eventually reach the Rambley's Wrangler trademark room, leading to the end of Molly Macaw. Here, Rambley finally opens up to you and reveals that he's been trapped at the entrance for the past 8 years and asks for your help to return the park to its former glory.
I need to be honest about something. The park has been inactive for years. Employees stopped showing up, guests too. The mascots are... I just was so excited to see a visitor, and I wanted to be sure you were given the best experience possible. But I was confined to the entrance for so long, I didn't realize just how much disrepair the park has fallen into. Wasting all of your fun time. Sorry for the inconvenience. But I have an idea. I have access to the repair documentation in my database. I just can't execute most tasks without authorization from a human user. You must have come here because the park matters to you too, right? Would you be willing to help me restore the park? I can see in your facial tracking data that you aren't opposed to this. Ooh, I'm so excited! Let's get this place back in business!
After leaving this area and moving to Oceanic Odyssey, the chapter ends with Finley being briefly visible as it all fades to black. So with that quick review of the chapter out of the way, let's get to what you all probably clicked on the video for, Rambley not being the original mascot of Indigo Park. While this may seem like a far-fetched idea, considering Rambley is on all of the merchandise, has his own ride at the entrance of the park, and has his own AI built in to represent the park and help out guests, there is some pretty substantial evidence to point towards Rambley not having been the original mascot. In fact, I believe the original mascot was none other than Lloydford L. Lyon. Now you may be asking, how can you be so sure that it's Lloyd and not one of the other characters? And my answer to that is simple: dialogue. Some of the main ideas that raised my suspicion of this being the truth were when I was reading Ed's thoughts on each collectible before selecting them. When hovering over the Lloyd plush, Ed states, "I feel like as a kid, Indigo used Lloyd a lot more. He was always one of my favorites." While this itself isn't substantial evidence, it does show that at one point, Indigo used to use Lloyd a lot more than they did at the end of the park's life. Another one of these dialogues that supports this idea is that while hovering over the retro Lloyd plush, Ed says, "I always find it weird when companies make merch that's supposed to look old. Lloyd obviously had an older look in the classic Indigo cartoons, but I'm not sure it looked like this. I guess nostalgia sells." Those last two lines there give a little more evidence to my claim, as it mentions Lloyd having an older look in the cartoons, yet in the cartoons, it didn't look like the plush does. It is possible that instead the plush was based on the older design of Lloyd back when the park first opened, which is thought to have been around the 1950s. If we were to take a look back at Disney for a second and decide to look at some of their character costumes from the same time, we would see these costumes match up quite well with what we are seeing. The 1950s Disney costumes were honestly kind of terrifying. I mean, you're telling me a kid willingly walked up to that thing? But apart from that, here is where I draw the similarities. These costumes do not match up with how the characters look in the cartoons, seeming to be their first rendition of a design like this. This is what I think happened with Lloyd. Is this still not enough evidence for you? Well, another big piece of evidence to this claim is Rambley's dialogue when selecting the vintage Lloyd plush, as he says,
I don't get why we even have those. And why do they only make one of Lloyd? Is it because he's the loudest? I can be loud too! Where's my limited edition throwback plush? Where's Molly's? Where's Finley's? Give this mistake to a child and they'll cry.
And while that last line there has to be one of my favorites that I've heard in a long while, this response shows that the park never made a vintage plush of the other characters, showcasing Lloyd's importance, but also Rambley's mention of it being a limited edition throwback plush gives me a feel that it is less of being based on the original cartoon design, and instead that of the original Lloyd design for the park. Now, I know this is a stretch, but bear with me folks as I present with you even more evidence. One of my favorite secrets that can be found is in the very first room once boarding Rambley's Railroad, where you can find a picture of Rambley and Lloyd shaking hands. Now, as a Disney fan, I have a speculation as to what this image could be referencing. At Walt Disney World on Winnie the Pooh's Wild Ride, you can find a similar picture in Owl's house on the ride, which features Owl and Mr. Toad shaking hands as Mr. Toad gives the deed to the attraction to Owl, as the original ride there on opening day had been Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. If this image is to be taken as more than a reference, then I believe that this is showing us that originally Lloyd used to be the main mascot of the park, before he handed over the role to Rambley. Or, at the very least, the ride had been his. Another detail that can be found on this ride may be a long shot, and I could have heard it incorrectly, but when entering Salem the Skunk's room and finding it destroyed, you encounter a broken Molly Macaw animatronic that briefly powers up, uttering some garbled nonsense, yet her final repeated lines seem clear. He hurt Lloyd. Now, who is he? Well, as much as I don't want to assume our little raccoon friend did, the evidence seems to be piling up against him. He and Lloyd have a strained relationship. It appears as if Rambley usurped the position as head mascot from him, and Rambley's aggressive dialogue involving Lloyd all put fingers back at him for having done so. And I guess that's it. While I can point fingers at any of these characters, Rambley just might be more of a rat than a raccoon. Either way, I thank you all for watching, and I guess it's time for the Tamebugster review.
I had so much fun on the rides. I'm so happy he is my guide. I am bound to return, I'm sure I'll see you again. Despite all of my words, I never met someone like you. And I'm sure it's true. At Indigo Park, there is a stark contrast to everything I know this place should be. But out of the dark, you've given a spark of sunshine to this channel's faithful devotee. At Indigo Park, more than my theories are pushing, even I don't know what lies ahead. But fight through the dark, and he'll be our spark of sunshine to get us out of any bind. till all of our questions are answered again, and he doesn't feel so left behind. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Peace.